All right, let's dive in. Today we're headed to Raynham Hall, a grand old estate over in Norfolk, England. Now, this place, it isn't really famous for, its fancy gardens or impressive architecture. It's known for something much more, spooky. It's resident ghost, the Brown Lady.
Ah, yes.
Sure, you've probably heard of her, right? Maybe you've even seen that iconic photograph, the one that's been sparking debates for almost a century. Well, we're going to be using Wikipedia's entry on the Brown Lady to guide our exploration today. It's surprisingly detailed, honestly. So the big question is, why? Why has this ghost story stuck around for so long? What is it about the Brown Lady that just keeps captivating us?
Well, one thing that's really interesting is that the Brown Lady isn't just some faceless, specter. She's believed to be Dorothy Walpole, the sister of Robert Walpole, who, as you may know, is considered Britain's first prime minister.
Oh, wow.
So right away, that connection to such a significant figure in history, it just elevates this story beyond your, typical ghost tale, grounds it in a specific time and place.
Right. It gives it that extra oomph. And her story, well, it's anything but a fairy tale. Dorothy was trapped in a really unhappy marriage to Charles Townshend, a man known for his temper and his, let's just say, outdated views on women.
Yes, unfortunately.
And he wasn't just any random guy either. He was Secretary of State and even led the House of Commons. Can you imagine the dynamics in that household?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it really underscores just how little power women had back then. Essentially, Dorothy was a prisoner in her own home, confined to Raynham Hall after these rumors of infidelity started going around.
Really?
And of course, she dies in 1726 from smallpox. It adds this layer of tragedy to an already heartbreaking situation.
It's almost like you can sense that sorrow, that feeling of entrapment, lingering in the very walls of the estate.
Exactly. It's almost as if that sorrow itself, manifested into the haunting.
Now, the hauntings, they didn't start right away, did they?
No, not immediately.
The first recorded sighting of the Brown Lady wasn't until almost a century after Dorothy's death. It was during a Christmas gathering in 1835, when a guest named Lucia C. Stone had an encounter with a woman dressed in, well, you guessed it, a brown dress. It's interesting how this one detail, the brown dress, became such a defining part of her image.
It really is. I mean, it's remarkable how that single element became so central to the legend. But it wasn't just Lucia who saw her. Later that same year, Colonel Loftus had a truly terrifying experience. He described seeing the Brown Lady, but her eyes, they were empty, just hollow sockets.
Oh, that's creepy. I actually read that some of the staff at Raynham Hall were so scared by these sightings that they quit.
Really?
Yeah, they'd rather face unemployment than spend another night in that house.
Wow.
There must have been something truly unsettling about those early encounters.
Oh, absolutely. And these weren't just fleeting glimpses either. They were vivid, detailed accounts. And what's particularly striking is how these early sightings, they seem to have genuinely affected those who saw her. It makes you wonder, about the psychological impact of these kinds of events.
Right, and why certain stories just seem to get passed down and down and down.
Exactly.
So it seems like those early sightings really gave the legend its legs, so to speak. But then things get really interesting when we get to Captain Frederick Marryat, a friend of Charles Dickens.
Oh, right.
And here's the kicker. He was a ghost story skeptic.
A skeptic.
Oh, yeah. He decided to stay in the most haunted room at Raynham Hall, determined to, debunk the whole myth. He even slept with a loaded revolver under his pillow.
A revolver.
Talk about dramatic.
Wow. It's interesting because his approach really reflects a common belief at the time. That you could actually affect ghosts with physical objects. It wasn't just about seeing them. It was about proving or disproving their existence.
Like whether they were actually there.
Right, exactly. And that mindset really says a lot about how people back then viewed the supernatural.
Like it had to be provable, tangible.
Yes, exactly.
So we've got this skeptic, right? Armed and ready to take on the Brown Lady. Did his skepticism hold up?
Well, for the first 2 nights, nothing. But on that third night, Marryat, he got a taste of the Brown Lady's, well, let's say her spectral sass.
Oh.
Late that evening, 2 young men stopped by his room. They invited him to come check out a new pistol they had. And as they're leaving, Marryat, maybe feeling a little bit brave, grabs his revolver and says, just in case you run into the Brown Lady.
Oh, man.
So they all have a good laugh and head down the hallway.
I can just picture these 3 guys, crammed in the doorway, trying to avoid an awkward encounter.
Right, like a scene from a play.
Exactly.
But what the encounter was a lot more terrifying than any social faux pas.
Yeah.
As this figure came closer, Marriott realized it wasn't a lady of the house at all, but the brown lady herself.
No way.
The very apparition he was so eager to debunk.
Oh, the irony.
You know, it makes you think about the power of actually experiencing something firsthand.
Mm-hmm.
How even the biggest skeptics can change their minds.
When they're face to face with the unexplainable, right?
Exactly.
So he claimed she was the spitting image of Dorothy Walpole's portrait, matching all the descriptions from earlier sightings. And get this, she stopped right in front of them, held her lamp up to her face, and grinned maliciously at Marriott.
Imagine that, standing there in the dark, and suddenly you're looking at the ghost you thought was just folklore.
Yeah, talk about a reality check.
Right?
So Marriott, Marriott, he was so enraged by her audacity that he jumped out and fired his revolver right at her.
He shot at a ghost.
I guess skepticism goes out the window when you're staring down a ghost's grin.
I suppose so.
Of course, the ghost vanished instantly. But the bullet, well, that had a more tangible trajectory. It went straight through the door across from them and lodged in the panel.
So he missed the ghost.
He did, but he definitely left his mark on Raynham Hall.
That's for sure.
Now, this encounter, it really solidified the brown lady's place in, well, haunted history. But it's also interesting that sightings seem to decrease after this.
That is interesting.
Do you think maybe she was put off by his aggression? Or maybe his story just scared off other skeptics?
It's hard to say for sure, but it is a curious shift. Maybe Marriott's actions disrupted something, or maybe people were just, more hesitant to share their own experiences after that, afraid of being ridiculed.
Right, who wants to be called crazy?
Exactly. But the brown lady, she wasn't about to just fade away. In 1926, Lady Townsend herself reported seeing her on the staircase.
Oh, wow, so not just guests anymore.
No. A member of the family.
It's like the haunting was becoming more intertwined with the family itself.
Yeah, it's a fascinating layer to the story.
But as we all know, the brown lady's fame really took off with that famous 1936 photograph, right?
Absolutely. In 1936, Captain Hubert C. Provand and his assistant, Andre Shira, were at Raynham Hall, photographing the estate for a magazine. They were setting up a shot of the main staircase. When Shira noticed something out of the corner of his eye, a vapory form is how he described it, slowly starting to look like a woman, coming down the stairs.
Chills.
Right.
So, Provand, thinking fast, took the cap off his lens, while Shira set off the flash. And that's how we got the iconic photograph of the brown lady.
The picture that would cause all sorts of debate about whether it was real or not.
And launch her into, well, global fame.
Exactly. And it wasn't just some blurry shape either. It clearly showed a figure in a gown, standing there on the stairs.
It's an image that really sticks with you, even if you try to tell yourself it's fake.
It really is.
So the brown lady went from local legend to international phenomenon.
Overnight?
Sparking fascination and, well, a lot of skepticism too.
And of course, with such a striking image, some skepticism was inevitable.
Right, people were bound to question it.
Some suggested that maybe Shira had, put grease on the lens to create that ghostly shape.
Oh, interesting.
Or that he had moved during the long exposure.
I mean, it makes sense, right? Photography was so new back then, and the technology wasn't, well, as good as it is now. It would have been pretty easy to accidentally mess up a photo.
Oh, definitely. Or to fake one on purpose.
Right. And, back then, everyone was really into spiritualism and seances and all that.
Absolutely. There was this huge fascination with the paranormal. But that also meant there were a lot of hoaxes and trickery going on.
So it was the perfect environment for a photo like this to come out?
Yeah, exactly.
So did anyone actually, investigate the photo? Did they think it was real?
Well, there was this guy, Harry Price. He was a pretty famous paranormal investigator back then. He talked to both Provand and Shira.
Oh, so he got the story straight from the source.
Right. And in the end, he actually believed them. He said the only way the photo could be fake was if they planned it beforehand.
Wow, so even a paranormal investigator was convinced. But what about modern analysis? Has anyone debunked the photo using today's technology?
Well, over the years, there's definitely been more skepticism. Photo analysts, like Joe Nickel, for example, they've pointed out that there's evidence of double exposure in the photo.
Double exposure.
Yeah, so basically 2 images were accidentally layered on top of each other.
Oh, wait.
Which suggests it was probably, an accident or maybe done on purpose.
So not actually a ghost.
Likely not.
And remember those experiments we talked about before, where they recreated similar images?
Oh, right.
That kind of makes it seem even more likely that the photo isn't real.
Yeah, it definitely casts doubt on its authenticity.
But even if the photo is fake, The whole story, with Dorothy's tragic life and all those vivid accounts, it still captures the imagination, doesn't it?
It really does.
It's like a real-life mystery.
It's got everything, the old house, the haunting backstory, the elusive figure caught on film. But I think what's really fascinating about the Brown Lady's story is that it's not just about, being scared of ghosts. It taps into our curiosity about what we don't understand, about whether there's something more out there.
That feeling of the unknown.
Yeah, whether it's a real haunting, a clever trick, or a bit of both. It makes us think about what we believe.
And question our reality a little bit.
Exactly.
And maybe that's why people are still so fascinated by the Brown Lady of Raynham Hall. Despite all the skeptical explanations, it reminds us that there are still mysteries in the world.
Mysteries we can't easily solve.
Or dismiss.
Right. Even if the Brown Lady is just, a figment of our collective imagination, her story has definitely left its mark. It reminds us that sometimes. The most powerful stories are the ones that blur the lines between fact and fiction.
The ones that make us wonder, what if? Well, there you have it, folks. The story of the Brown Lady of Raynham Hall. A tale of tragedy, mystery, and the enduring power of a good ghost story. Whether you believe in ghosts or not, I think we can all agree that there's something captivating about this legend, something that keeps us coming back for more. So the next time you find yourself in a dark, old house, take a moment to listen. You never know what whispers you might hear from the shadows.